morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the High Dragon's Breath Bow Wow, welcoming you back to another episode of Arkan's Alternatives, talking about Helldivers 2 Red Stratagems, Artillery and Eagle 1, baby, orbitals and missiles, and rockets and bombs and all the good things. Let's get right into it. Second upload of the day. You got to love it. So, big thing about a lot of the orbital stratagems that we'll be starting with. The orbitals tend to have two things relatively consistent. You tend to get less of them, they tend to be a little bit slower, and they also have variable call-in times at certain levels. The more logistical or organizational ones, like the stun ones, the gas ones, EMS, etc., they tend to be pretty quick and you get more of them. Same thing with the orbital barrages, like airburst and Gatling, but the artillery can be very variable. So things like the precision strike you'll get more often than walking barrages, 380s, or even 120s. But we'll go into that with each of them, starting off with the orbital smoke strike, seen right here. Now, the orbital stuff is called down from your super destroyer, meaning that it is relatively accurate from a top-down angle, and you don't have to worry too much about where you're throwing your stratagem, as long as it's relatively on target. And in my opinion, the orbital smoke strike is kind of the ultimate gimmick stratagem. On the one hand, if you run a stealth build in Helldivers 2, which is entirely possible, all you need is light armor, the jetpack, and a lot of smoke grenades, essentially. Once you kind of get into the build of having a smoke system or a smoke or stealth build, the orbital smoke strike becomes far more useful than it is to a normal player. To any normal player, the orbital smoke strike is not necessarily entirely useless, but it's much more of a gimmick than you would imagine, because it can interfere with your line of sight as much as it interferes with the enemy's line of sight. And while it's useful for distracting or maybe even containing certain enemies that you can see, it's often, preferable in many cases to just destroy them with another stratagem rather than try and rely on the orbital smoke strike to just suppress them and keep them from attacking you. Again, if you're running that kind of full smoke, full stealth build, or if you find yourself often having an issue with getting outgunned or overshot by enemy factions, the orbital smoke strike can be useful, but generally I don't see it as all that good. It definitely has the most use against bots, because you can use it to interfere with their line of sight and make it much harder for them to shoot you. And I think that is one of the main reasons to use the orbital smoke strike. For the EMS strike, we have another one that is useful against a lot of factions, but is mostly useful against the bots. So it is a massive AP4 stunning strike. The real sufferer here is the fact that it's only AP4. That means that it's not going to stun a lot of the bigger enemies or the tanks that you might hope that it does when you drop it on a target. It basically means that it will absolutely blitz and stun into non-working function a lot of the bot infantry, but it will leave most of the bruisers and the tanks completely unstunned or relatively unfazed. It is pretty big, though, unlike a lot of other EMS stuff, so it's not a terrible pick, but it definitely is way more circumstantial than the orbital smoke strike. I would see it being used a lot on bug maps, except for the fact that the next stratagem exists, and that is the orbital gas strike. The orbital gas strike is a huge confusion strike. It lets out a massive plume of greenish gas that spreads out, confuses, and makes all of the bugs go crazy. This is super useful, and in my opinion, it does the job of both the EMS and the orbital smoke strike. It does the job of the orbital smoke strike by distracting your enemies, breaking line of sight, and making them no longer focus on running at you. And it completes the EMS thing because it deals massive stunning damage and can cause enemies to attack each other on bug maps specifically. So I think this one is a good kind of compromise between the two of them. But all in all, these kind of logistical orbital stratagems are not really my plaything. They definitely have their place, especially the gas strike with its kind of two-piece system or two-piece advantage. But yeah, they're just not for me, and I don't rank them very highly because most of them are circumstantially useful and not necessarily incredibly good when compared to some of the other options that we have here. Speaking of other options, matter of fact, of the first option that we have access to, the Precision Orbital Strike, or the Orbital Precision Strike. This is one of the simplest stratagems to call in. It's the first stratagem that you get, and it is direct, fast, prompt, and on the go, direct impact ordnance from space. It is relatively analogous, I think closely analogous, to a single 380mm shell, essentially fired from space like a sniper rifle to hit a specific target. It has a fairly decent radius of damage, and it's very effective at knocking out enemy structures, and also you can stick it to enemy heavy targets, and it can destroy them in that way. Now, the Orbital Precision Strike is useful in the fact that it comes back very quickly compared to most of the orbital artillery stratagems. So, if you get good with using it, and if you kind of prep a lot of your build within your Super Destroyer to be around orbital strikes, the Orbital Precision Strike isn't a bad pick. I used it for quite a bit, but I found a slightly better build for my artillery that we'll talk about in a bit. The next one up is another precision option, the Orbital Rail Cannon. The Orbital Rail Cannon is a bit of a unique one. It's similar to some of those really powerful anti-tank stratagem, the weapons that we talked about. You throw it, it locks onto the largest or most dangerous target in the area, and then it hits it with a single incredibly high damage, basically sniper rifle shot to the brain. Now this is very good at getting rid of Striders, tanks, Bile Titans, Crushers, Chargers, anything that you would like murdered. Not only do you not have to aim the Orbital Rail Cannon because it aims itself towards the largest target, it pretty much instantly kills most things. I think that it might struggle with Factory Striders, but I haven't really tested that one myself. The big issue that I have with the Orbital Rail Cannon is that it takes quite a lot of time comparison to the Orbital Precision Strike and a lot of the birds to call in, and it really only kills a single target, and it decides what the quote-unquote biggest or most dangerous target is, meaning that theoretically it could lock onto buildings or tanks or other vehicles or enemies that you weren't necessarily intending to be your target. So the Orbital Rail Cannon kind of thinking for itself is something that I dislike, and the fact that it only gets one shot is also a bit of a limitation. Speaking of things that do not get one shot, the Orbital Napalm Barrage. I often just refer to this as severe punishment, because that is exactly what it is, to both you and to the enemies. I have been killed by Orbital Napalm Barrages more times than I have used the Orbital Napalm Barrage. This kills your allies a lot. Not as much as the stratagems that I like to use, but it kills your allies a lot. One of the great things about the Orbital Napalm Barrage, and the reason I call it severe punishment, is how long it sticks around. The Napalm Barrage stays on the ground and continues dealing a lot of DOT damage for like 15 seconds. So there's an initial explosive barrage of like 120mm shells. They break open and spray a bunch of jellied napalm everywhere, and they light an entire huge area on fire, basically burning out a large section of the map. This is great against bugs. This is okay against bots. This is really situational against the Illuminate. I would never bring it against the Illuminate, mostly because they do not gang up in large enough groups for the Napalm Barrage to be all that effective, in my opinion. If you're getting chased, maybe the Napalm Barrage is good, but there's so many flying enemies that it seems like a waste to me. And really it doesn't have any AoE damage other than the DOT fire, so it's severe punishment, best used against bugs and bug nests, and mega nests. It's super, super satisfying to go into an area where you know there's a bunch of bugs, like the specimen areas where there's a lot of bugs, and also the mega nests, and just toss the severe punishment globe. The ball that makes you scream and howl in pain, as I like to call it, the Orbital Napalm Barrage, right into the middle of it and just burn them all out. Or toss it really close to the entrance and then light them up and watch them all walk into the fire. Really fun. Bugs are dumb. So, next one is a little bit of an interesting one in my opinion. The orbital laser. It is like a combination between the orbital rail cannon and the orbital napalm barrage. Or really, it's more of a combination between the rail cannon and the walking barrage. The orbital laser is an anti-tank, ant-burning magnifying glass. So if anybody's ever seen those things where you take a magnifying glass on a hot sunny day and you burn ants on the sidewalk, that is exactly what the orbital laser is, except the laser is from your super destroyer and the ants are terminids. So basically it follows around targets within the area and melts them with anti-tank fire. It lasts for a little bit of time and it can kill lots of different targets. My one issue with this is where it chooses to start, and also the fact that it doesn't turn off when it stops or when it chooses a new target. So it will oftentimes move around you, and I have occasionally been shot by my own orbital laser because there were enemies that were danger close with me. So on that count, I don't use it as much, and also some of the bonuses and upgrades that work for most orbital stratagems don't actually affect the orbital laser. So for example, like bore sight doesn't affect the orbital laser, so the call-in time and the damage doesn't last as long as some of the other orbitals. So I would use it, I would love to use it more often, but as it is, I prefer my regular loadout. So, let's get to the first of my 3 in a row that are my regular loadout. My regular loadout is the Walking Barrage, the Orbital 380 Barrage, and the Orbital 120 Barrage. I usually take those 3 and a single anti-tank support weapon. Usually it's the recoilless rifle, though I might switch back to the Quasar Cannon given the current state of the game. We'll see. Or I might even switch over to the spear, or, I don't know, anti-tank something else. The only one that would ever come out of that build would be I would drop the 120 if there was something I needed to bring with me, or some other stratagem I wanted to test out. But the Walking Barrage and the Orbital 380 are auto-includes, for the reasons that I'll tell you right now. The Walking Barrage is what I like to call, I carry a 380mm for self-defense. It is a line, or realistically it's a short set of clustered bombardments that go in a straight line from where you throw the stratagem towards a target, and it lasts like almost 30 seconds, meaning that it drops the equivalent of a 380mm barrage in a staggered line from you until the stratagem stops. This has 2 incredibly based uses in-game. My favorite ones are basically World War I tactics, the creeping barrage where you throw a 380 at your feet, you back up about 30 meters, you wait for 3 explosions, you walk forward, wait for 3 explosions, walk forward, kill anything that the 380 hasn't knocked out yet. The other one is, oh my god, that's a lot of enemies running at me. I'm going to run in this opposite direction, and I'm going to toss a 380 walking barrage backwards. So basically, as the enemies come out of whatever bug hole or bot nest they currently are inhabiting, and they go to chase you, as the bots and the bugs like to do, they all of a sudden are getting constantly hit by 380mm shells that keep tracing back down their line and then go back to whatever structure they were in and blow that up as well. So it's not just like the single target or the area of effect weapons that we've looked at so far. The 380 Walking Barrage affects more physical area for a longer period of time than any other stratagem in the game, period, end of story. The Walking Barrage affects a massive area. It can hit multiple separate strategic targets. It can obliterate multiple objectives in a single intelligent use. Yes, there's a little bit of RNG involved, but it's got an insane amount of firepower for a call-in stratagem that you can use several times during the game. It's a great option, and honestly, it will never leave my lineup. It's such a good weapon. The next one is another one that will absolutely never leave my lineup, and that is the Orbital 380mm Barrage. Again, I run it so that these have longer call-in times. Essentially, I get an extra barrage in for every barrage, extra bullet per bullet. And the tagline with the 380 is, you know what? World War I was really pretty, and I gotta admit, the 380 is 50% style, 50% the most devastating damage that you can ever achieve in this game. Throw a 380 at any, and I mean any given target, and I guarantee you that if it's not a bug nest, you will destroy at least a good portion of it. Automaton outposts, gone. Automaton fortresses, half gone. Any airfield in the game, Illuminate or Automaton, absolutely obliterated. And it looks beautiful while doing it. It is a constant smashing barrage of, like, massive shells. 380mm shells are absolutely enormous, used for flattening entire buildings in our own history. So, it's insanely powerful. And while a lot of people do complain, yes, this does kill your allies. I have thrown many 380mm barrages. About 50% of the time that I have thrown them, an ally has conspicuously died. That does not mean that the stratagem is bad. That just means that my allies were not paying attention. It's not my fault that you died to the 380. It's your fault that you died to the 380. It's not my fault. You ran within the 150-meter radius of this thing's hit strikes. It's not my fault. So, with that clear piece of not propaganda out of the way, the 380's incredible, genuinely. With all of its upgrades and buffs, and with the extension to its reach, damage, range, and yield, oh my goodness, you can reduce almost anything. And the other great part is, there's nothing it doesn't work against. Factory Striders? No problem. Random Factory Striders in the middle of nowhere? No problem. Massive Fortresses? Awesome. Even bugs. It struggles against some bug structures, specifically the ones that have a lot of overhang and walls, but the flat ones, or the ones that are in ditches or in, like, culverts in the ground, 380 obliterates them. Like, genuinely knocks out at least half the holes and most of the bugs. It disorients your enemies. It obliterates everything that the Illuminate has. Honestly, the 380 is overkill against most of the Illuminate structures because it just destroys them. It can do some stuff to the Disruptor Towers, as in it obliterates anything nearby them, so you can just go in and finish them off. But in general, the 380 is incredibly effective, and you can use it for a very World War I style mass artillery attack tactic, which is where the second artillery piece comes into play. The Orbital 120 Barrage. It is the 380, but you won't die instantly if you try and walk near, around, or through it. The Orbital 120 is not very useful on its own. It is effectively just the 380, except it does half the damage, and you get a lot more individual shots, meaning it covers more individual areas, kind of like a scattergun, except it's using artillery rounds. However, where it comes into play is when you combine the Orbital 380 with the Orbital 120 at the same time to the same target. This results in where the 380 might have lacked some accuracy and left a bunch of gaps between the firing, the Orbital 120 leaves no gaps. If you fire the 380 and the 120 at the same target or the same set of structures, it's a guaranteed you don't have to worry about cleaning up afterward. It's good, it's done, it's dusted, it's all perfect. What's also great is because the Orbital 120 does a little bit less damage to you, the 380 just insta-kills you if it comes anywhere near you, and it throws you like a ragdoll if it's, within any distance of you. But the Orbital 120 is a lot more forgiving with the friendly fire, so if you have allies that are mad at you, for completely unreasonable reasons, by the way, their own skill issue, that's why they're mad at me, if you have allies that are mad at you, use the 120 to help them out, instead of throwing a 380 directly at the point. Words to live by. That's another reason the orbital walking is so good, because if your allies died to the first orbital walking, at least it's not going to stay there. It's going to keep moving on, so they won't be in danger for as long. I love orbital artillery. It's lovely, but yeah. The idea with the 120 and why I use it so often and so much is I combine it with the 380. I really don't like to throw the 120 by itself because it does leave a lot to be desired in terms of sheer hitting power. Sure, it gets rid of all of the targets that aren't tanks and it damages tanks heavily, but against a lot of structures, it just doesn't have the hitting power or the radius to instantly destroy entire outposts. Against light outposts and against objectives, sure. But if you're talking about big nests and fortresses, you want to throw them together not only to cover more area, but also so that you can guarantee that there's no gaps left behind, which is great. I've cratered entire automaton fortresses using all three of these in conjunction, which is another way you can do it. You can toss down the 380 on the back of the target, the 120 on the close side of the target so that you can get closer, and then throw a walking barrage right down the middle. Because the walking barrage goes left to right to right, left to right to right, essentially it walks sideways and forward, kind of a candy stripe. You can kind of predict where it's going to drop, and you can use that to drop it at specific angles where it's more likely to hit enemy structures. That's really what I use it for, is this kind of intentional, well-designed structure buster that I can aim better than the 380 or the 120 in any case. So yeah, those are my three favorites, and they're the ones that are almost always included within my build. The last two that we have, and honestly ones that get a lot of play because of how fast they come up, the one disadvantage of all those big orbitals is that they take more time to come back, but you do get to use them 2 or 3 times per every mission. The next ones are the Orbital Airburst and the Orbital Gatling. The Orbital Airburst is, I have a shotgun in the sky with which to punish you. It is a airburst shell. It's got medium penetration, but it blasts a whole area with several, essentially 12-gauge buckshot shells from space. Now, this is very useful against bugs, and kind of useful against bots in some cases. I find against the Illuminate it has a lot of limitations because Overseers don't tend to group up as much, and this doesn't have a ton of usefulness against structures overall. So it's definitely more of that anti-infantry weapon that you want to use almost like an Eagle stratagem, just to call in to deal with problems, Johnny-on-the-spot style, and it's pretty effective at taking out medium armored enemies. Then you have the Orbital Gatling Gun, which is, this one area deserves many bullets, right now. This is incredibly useful against bugs. While the Airburst is good against bugs and bots, the Orbital Gatling is good against bugs, and theoretically it's also good against the Illuminate. The Orbital Gatling focuses on a single area and then absolutely shreds it with the equivalent of an A-10 Warthog strike from space. This strike lasts quite a bit of time, and all of this shrapnel and shells flying around will absolutely close down things like choke points. It can obliterate bug tunnels that have things coming out of them. If there are bug breaches, the Orbital Gatling is great against that, and realistically, the best way to use the Orbital Gatling is to find enemies who are in a choke point, and then just drop the Gatling on them, and it will absolutely shred them for several seconds, clearing you out a whole area. So, these are definitely more on-the-spot stratagems as opposed to the pure destruction stratagems, or the specialized death or the utilitarian orbital stratagems. Still some of my absolute favorite red line stratagems. Against bugs, the best possible option is likely the Orbital Napalm Strike. Against the Illuminate, myself personally, I am a big fan of the Orbital Laser, just because it can target lots of different enemies with very good effectiveness, and against the bots, there is absolutely no substitute for the Orbital 380 and the Orbital Walking. There is no substitute. It's so effective and so brutally efficient at knocking them out that I really couldn't justify anything else being better against the bots. It's awesome. Moving on to the second half of the Red Line stratagems, Eagle 1. Our aircraft stratagems, all our bombers and all that stuff. So, the first one that we have is the Eagle Strafing Run, or as I like to call it, Suffer Instantly. Suffer instant death, I cast pain. The Eagle strafing run is essentially a F-16 with its 23mm Gatling gun, making a nice fancy gun run in a single line across the angle of the stratagem. You use this very similar to the orbital Gatling gun, except it can hit more targets in a line. It's good against most light enemies, and it's relatively okay against medium enemies, but the really good part about the Eagle strafing run is you can call this son of a bitch in off cooldown. It's quick, and they come back relatively swiftly. So it's good for that. It's good for clearing out lots of chaff enemies, but other than that, it struggles against most other opponents. Also, aiming it can sometimes be difficult. I've known some people that I'm not going to name who have a little bit of difficulty when it comes to not friendly firing people with the Eagle strafing run. However, it's not nearly as bad as the next one, which is the Eagle Airstrike. The Eagle Airstrike is, man, the Gulf War was pretty cool, wasn't it? Eagle 1 comes along and drops like 2 or 3 100-kilogram bombs in a similar kind of strafing run style to the Eagle strafing run. The airstrike is pretty effective at killing lots of medium enemies. It's essentially one step up from the strafing run, except it can also destroy some structures. Not big ones, not heavily durable ones, and quite often with the Eagle airstrikes you'll notice that because they have like really weird pathing, or they can sometimes be difficult to aim or do less damage, you may have to call in a second run. However, because they're Eagle and not orbital, they take a lot less time to actually call in, so that's not necessarily a negative. It's just myself personally, I don't like having to do a job twice, which you probably noticed from my love of the 380mm orbital barrage. So, the airstrike is pretty cool, but it also has a quote-unquote cooler older brother, and that is the Eagle cluster bomb. Artillery is slow. I want it now. And that is what the cluster bomb is. So, similar to the support weapon, the airburst rocket launcher, the cluster bomb comes through and absolutely saturates an entire area with explosive bomblets. Bomblets are essentially the size of a grenade and have armor piercing of medium. They are highly effective at getting rid of large groups of bugs or bots because, well, the shrapnel from them is armor piercing and they do quite a bit of damage, and they saturate whole, wide, large areas, unlike the airstrike and strafing run, which only do individual, like lines, basically, of damage. So the cluster bomb is really the closest thing that the Eagle has to genuine artillery outside of the 100mm rocket pods and the 500-kilogram bomb. So in my opinion, I actually like the cluster bomb a whole lot more than the other two because it can be called in on an area rather than me having to worry about aiming at a single direct group of targets or a choke or area. I'm not sure if it could do as much against structures. I'm pretty sure it can't damage structures as opposed to the airstrike, but still very, very good considering that a lot of Eagle stuff can't do much damage to structures unless you hit it directly. The next one is the Eagle Napalm Strike, and it's the irradiated line of cobalt. Again, this is another line aircraft stratagem. Drops down a bunch of flaming stuff onto a line of enemies or a line of targets at a certain distance away from you, as per the Eagle red line, kind of going in an angle and then dropping off incendiaries behind it. This is not as good as the orbital napalm strike, in my opinion. While it is on demand, it doesn't do immediate damage. I mean, it has a little bit, but it really relies on the DOT to do most of the damage, and the napalm strike seems to last longer. So I could see this being useful as another kind of Jimmy on the spot, but mostly for bugs. Like, I definitely don't want to use this against either bots or the Illuminate, just because it doesn't have that range or explosive damage to get rid of things. It relies mostly on the fire, which means that it is most effective against the bugs, who are going to line up in nice little conga lines and run at you in a nice easy way for the napalm strike to get rid of them. Quite helpful, but definitely more limited in terms of its effectiveness against other, against other factions. The Eagle Smoke Strike. I cannot see anything now, and now you cannot see anything either. The Eagle Smoke Strike seems to be one of those stratagems, unlike the Orbital Smoke Strike, that you almost don't want to call on your enemy. You kind of want to call it in on yourself, at least to the point where you want to break line of sight with the enemy because it's smaller than the orbital one, but larger than grenades. You probably just want to call it in directly on your position, and then run away, have it break line of sight with you, and then continue engagement. Again, I don't really hold with using smoke as a main tactic in this game. It definitely has its place with those builds like we talked about before, but yeah, unless you're running a full smoke build, in which case you're probably going to have the Eagle Smoke Strike and the Orbital Smoke Strike, I would not see a really good reason to use this, just because it's smaller than the Orbital Smoke Strike overall, so you're just losing out on utility most of the time. You know, if you rely on smoke that much, you should bring them both. That's what I'll say. The next one is the Eagle 110mm rocket pods. These are absolutely brutal. It's like a MiG-29's rocket pods on the underside of the Eagle. The 110mm rocket is insanely powerful, and it basically is the equivalent of, I am a 120mm barrage, I am on demand in less time. However, you do get a lot less damage overall and utility out of the 110mm rocket pods because they are in a line or at individual targets, basically. So, unlike being a barrage or of an area or over a time period, it's a single blast through with these rockets, which, while very, very effective and able to damage structures pretty heavily, they're not as good as the 120mm barrage, in my opinion. These are very effective against bots. I've noticed that they're super good at knocking out striders, they absolutely dumpster most of the medium armored enemies, and they can also really heavily damage hulks and possibly even destroy them. I have seen them used to destroy some bot structures, but I think that you should save that for the Illuminate, against which they are absolutely primo, in my opinion, even better than the cluster bombs, just because they have a higher explosive and can damage more enemies with a single shot, and they can damage more structures. So throwing them at the Illuminate structures is a great option. And amongst all of the Eagle stratagems, I see this one being used way more, significantly more than the Eagle Airstrike. I think mostly because of that fact that it damages structures more, and it has more sheer firepower than the cluster bomb and AP damage. Moving on to, in my opinion, the best of the Red Line Eagle 1 strategies, the 500 kilogram bomb. Let me read off its many names. The J-Dam, the Flying Precision Orbital, the Bug Buster, the Bile Titan Bane, artillery, for those who don't like tube artillery, and many, many more names. The 500 kilogram bomb is unlike many of its inferior brothers. It is a very large, very heavy, high explosive warhead dropped upon the unexpecting heathens, thence to explode and expunge their foul existence from my democratic planet. So, whether it is Xenos, foul automata, or even fouler Xenos, the 500 kilogram does it. It destroys tanks, it destroys striders, it destroys Bile Titans so effectively that I've given it its own name, and it is massively effective against lots of different targets. However, it is only a single strike, it does take a couple of seconds to call in, and as compared to a lot of tube artillery, it doesn't stick around. So you can't hit a lot of different targets, you can't hit targets moving through an area, you only get one shot at this, and if you miss, it has the longest refill time of any of the Eagle stratagems. So, I love the 500 kilogram bomb. If I was forced to take an Eagle 1 stratagem, which I generally don't do, if I was forced to take one, I would take the 500 kilogram, because it works the best against every single faction, barring maybe the Illuminate, because they're more spread out. But even against the Illuminate, I would take it just to deal with the tripods. So, worth. The other ones that I would say, against the bugs, your best option is probably the Napalm Strike. Against the bots, it's the 110mm rocket pods. For sure, definitely 100%. I see that doing the most damage, the most consistently to the most variety of targets. So, that is our Red Line stratagems done, and we are almost at the end for this section of our Helldivers 2 series. Again, there have been a lot of updates. I intend to do some stuff with that. We will see more content soon, but I will be moving back into Warhammer for a bit before we get back into the Helldiver stuff again. I'm probably going to wait for another update or another War Bond before I go and do the most recent War Bond. just to do them all at once and make sure that I'm not just updating for a single war bond, you know. And the other thing is we do need to get back to Warhammer content, so don't worry. I think one more video of Helldivers 2 is coming out, and then I will be moving back into several other ideas that you guys have given me over the last couple of months, and finishing up with more of the cycle, more of the votes, and maybe some more stuff. I intend to stream as soon as I get my new computer, so we'll be hoping for a stream very soon to critique and do some stuff on animations. And with that, I wish you all a lovely good night.